My name is Mark Lawson. I'm 37, an EMT in Denver, and for most of my adult life, I honestly believed that being dependable was enough to build a marriage on. My days started at 5 a.m. alarms in the dark, coffee that tasted like burnt battery acid, uniform on before the sun even bothered to show up, 12-hour shifts in the ambulance, weaving through traffic with sirens up, walking into the worst 10 minutes of someone else's life and being the calm in the room. I'd come home with aching feet and that strange, quiet satisfaction you get from helping people whose names you'll never learn. Amanda lived in a different universe entirely. 33, public relations, downtown high-rises, and hotel bars where the napkins had logos and the smiles did too. Her world was rooftop cocktails, networking dinners, national conferences where everyone talked like a press release and compared status through job titles and zip codes. In the beginning, she used to brag about me. "My husband saves lives," she'd tell people, hand on my arm, proud and a little smug. Somewhere over the years, that shifted. The compliments turned into comments about ambition, earning potential, and how she was carrying the long-term vision. Little digs dressed up as jokes. I heard them. I just pretended I didn't. It was a Friday in September when she mentioned it. We were in the kitchen, her scrolling through emails, me packing my lunch for the next shift I didn't actually have. I'd swapped for a day off. "I might invite a few colleagues over next week," she said. "Just a low-key dinner. Nothing fancy. Nothing fancy." I nodded, said, "Sure. Sounds good." Like it was nothing. But something in me wanted to turn it into more. Maybe I was trying to remind her who she'd married. Maybe I was reminding myself. On my day off, I went to work anyway, just a different kind. House scrubbed from top to bottom. Floors mopped, windows wiped, every surface cleared. I set the table like a restaurant spread. Candles, cloth napkins, the good plates we almost never used. I spent the afternoon chopping tomatoes for bruschetta, stirring wild mushroom risotto until it turned silky, layering espresso-soaked ladyfingers for homemade tiramisu. My back hurt by the time I was done, but it was a good kind of pain. This was my way of saying, without using the words, I still choose you. At 6:30 p.m., I was in an apron, checking the oven, when I heard her key in the door. "Hey, she started, stepping inside. She stopped, took in the candles, the table, the smells coming from the kitchen. Her eyes ran over everything like she was looking at a staged photo, not her own home. And instead of softening, instead of that old spark of pride or affection, her face did this small, tight thing, half embarrassment, half annoyance. "Mark, what is all this?" she asked, lowering her voice like someone might overhear. I felt a hairline crack in my chest. Just a thin line, easy to ignore if you want to. So I smiled, wiped my hands on the apron, and lied to both of us. "Just trying to make it a nice night," I said. "That's all." I pretended not to see that she'd already decided it was too much. Too earnest. Too me. By 7, the doorbell started going. First were the 3 women, heels on hardwood, perfume cloud before I even saw their faces. All of them dressed like a magazine spread. Sharp blazers, silk blouses, jewelry that didn't make a sound because real gold doesn't have to announce itself. They handed me wine and polite smiles. "You must be Mark," one of them said. "We've heard so much about you." I couldn't tell if that was good or bad, so I just took their coats and hung them up. Then he arrived. Victor Hale. Silver hair, tailored suit, that relaxed posture of a man who's used to being the highest paid person in every room. He stepped in like he owned the air. "Victor," Amanda said, and her voice warmed in a way it hadn't for me in a long time. "This is my husband, Mark." He shook my hand without really looking at me. Grip just a shade too firm, like he was checking my measurement. "Good to finally meet you," he said, eyes already drifting past me into the house. "Nice place." "Thanks," I answered. "Can I take your coat?" "Sure thing, champ." "Champ." We sat down at the table. I poured wine, passed plates, tried to track the conversation, but it may as well have been in another language: campaign metrics, brand alignment, Q4 projections, some client's yacht in Miami. Every story orbited around Victor. Every laugh bent his way. Whenever I spoke, it felt like a commercial break. The risotto was the one thing I trusted. I moved around the table, serving each plate. When I got to Amanda, I leaned in, set the spoon down gently, happy to finally offer her the thing I'd spent hours perfecting. She turned slightly in her chair, bright smile on, looking at her coworkers instead of me. "Mark is just so helpful," she said. "It's not a quality you find in truly successful men." The words hung there. One of the women let out a quick, nervous laugh. The others followed, the way people do when they're not sure if something's mean or funny but don't want to be the only one not laughing. Victor didn't hesitate. "Hey," he said, raising his glass. "Somebody's got to take care of the house while the real professionals are out building empires." This time the laughter was real. Open. Easy. Amanda looked right at me and added, "Exactly. Some men are born to serve. Others are born to lead." The room went muffled, like someone had dropped a pillow over my head. I could see mouths moving, hands gesturing, but the sound tunneled away. My heart was loud. My breathing was loud. Everything else faded. I set the serving spoon down like it was fragile evidence at a scene. Straightened up. No joke. No smile. "Excuse me," I said. I walked out of my own dining room, past the candles I'd lit, past the kitchen I'd scrubbed, up the stairs I'd vacuumed that morning. Nobody called after me. The laughter rolled on. In our bedroom, I sat on the edge of the bed, hands shaking, staring at the floor. That was the moment it clicked. This wasn't a rough patch. This wasn't a bad mood or a stressful week at work. This was her telling the truth about how she saw me, out loud in my own home, to the man she clearly wished I was. I lay on top of the covers in the dark and listened to my own house forget I existed. Downstairs, glasses clinked. Someone told a story that made them all laugh loud enough to rattle the light fixtures. Occasionally I'd catch Amanda's voice, all bright edges and fake warmth, and I'd picture her at the same table where she'd called me born to serve. Nobody came looking for me. Not her. Not anyone. Around midnight, the voices thinned out. Doors closed, heels clicked, engines started. By 1, the house was quiet. I still didn't move. Humiliation is hot at first. It burns in your throat, makes your hands shake, makes you want to punch drywall or yell until your voice breaks. If you don't act on it, though, it does something else. It cools, hardens, sharpens. By 2, I wasn't replaying the joke anymore. I was replaying the tone, the comfort, the way she'd said it in front of Victor like it wasn't the first time that line had lived in her mouth. At some point I heard the couch springs creak, the thud of her shoes hitting the floor downstairs. I waited for footsteps on the stairs, for the doorknob to turn, for her to say, "Can we talk?" Or at least offer one of those cheap half apologies you give to keep the peace. Nothing. She passed out where she landed and left me alone upstairs with the silence she'd earned. At 2 a.m., I swung my legs off the bed. I wasn't shaking anymore. Just empty. The house smelled like cooled garlic and old wine. The candles were dead, wax puddled around the wicks. Amanda was sprawled on the couch in her dress, makeup smudged, one arm hanging off the edge, an unfinished glass of red sitting on the coffee table like she'd gotten bored of it. What hurt wasn't the insult. It was that she hadn't even come up to check if the man she'd humiliated in front of her boss was breathing okay. I sat in the armchair across from her and just watched for a while. Watched the tiny hitch in her breath. Watched the way her phone buzzed on the cushion beside her and she didn't stir. The laptop was on the coffee table. Personal one. Not the company-issued one. The screen was black, but the little light on the side pulsed like a heartbeat in sleep mode. There's a line I'd never crossed in our marriage. I don't snoop. I don't read over my shoulders. I don't dig through pockets. That's how I was raised. Trust is given until it's clearly not deserved. Tonight, she'd made something very clear. At 5 a.m., with the first gray hint of daylight starting to leak through the blinds, I leaned forward and tapped the spacebar. The screen woke up to her email. No password prompt. She'd logged in and forgotten to close it. Inbox open. Folders lined up neatly on the side. I didn't go to the inbox. People hide in plain sight, but they confess in the outbox. I clicked sent. Work messages, sure. Pitch decks, follow-ups. Circling back on this. All the usual corporate nothing. I kept scrolling. Then I saw the name. Victor Hale. The first email I opened was from a conference in Chicago. Hotel details. Flight info. A half-joking line about hoping the only thing that keeps us up all night is the client presentation. I felt my stomach tighten. Not surprising. Just confirmation. I opened another. Last night was exactly what I needed. I feel alive around you in a way I never do at home. Another. Mark is useful. Reliable. He doesn't cause trouble. But he doesn't push me. He doesn't make me feel like I'm standing next to someone big. I kept going. There were references to our hotel in Seattle, the room with the awful curtains in Phoenix, the parts of the trip where we didn't work, photos attached, nothing graphic, just enough. Her dress is slightly undone. His hand on her waist in a mirror selfie. The kind of things people send when they're sure nobody will ever look. Every email didn't just hurt. It rearranged the last few years in my head. The late meetings. The travel opportunities. The way she'd come home wired. Glowing, vibrating with a life that never seemed to include me. Then I opened the one that killed whatever was left. Subject line. Dinner. She'd sent it the afternoon before. To Victor. Mark's insisting on cooking some big homemade meal tonight for everyone. Sweet, but also sad. He keeps doing these small, earnest things that just remind me how small he really thinks. You'll see what I mean when you meet him. Small. Not my paycheck. Not my job. Me. I leaned back in the chair and stared at that sentence until the words almost blurred. Then they stopped being letters and just became one thing, truth. Fine. If that's the story she wanted to write about me, I was done being the idiot who funded the paper. I stood, went to the desk drawer where we kept random tech junk, found a flash drive I'd gotten for free at some training years back, plugged it into the side of the laptop. I didn't rush. I moved like I was on a call, methodical, focused, created a folder, dragged every email thread with Victor into it. Every photo, every calendar is lined up with work trips. Copied it all to the flash drive. When it was done, I ejected it properly, slid it into my pocket, and closed the laptop halfway so it looked just like it had when I sat down. Then I poured myself a cup of coffee in my own kitchen, sat at my own table, and waited for my wife to wake up. I wasn't guessing anymore. The house was dead quiet when she woke up. I heard the small sounds first, couch springs, a soft groan, the shuffle of bare feet on hardwood. I was at the kitchen table, a second cup of coffee in front of me, her laptop open and turned so the screen faced the doorway. The emails were right there. Her words to him. No way to pretend they didn't exist. She came into the kitchen rubbing her eyes, hair messier than usual, mascara smeared at the edges. For a second, she didn't see the screen. Just saw me, sitting there in yesterday's clothes, calm in a way she wasn't used to. "Hey," she mumbled. "You were gone last night, Then her eyes hit the laptop. She froze like she'd been shot. The color drained straight out of her face. You could almost see her brain flipping through explanations, lies, angles. "Mark," she said, voice going thin. "What are you doing?" I held her gaze, then nodded at the screen. "Reading," I said, "about how small and useful I am." She stepped forward, faster now, like she could physically block the words from hitting me, from existing. "You had no right to go through my—" I cut her off with one raised hand. "Don't," I said. My voice came out steady. "You don't get to talk about privacy after you spent months turning me into a joke and scheduling hotel rooms with your boss." She swallowed. Hard. It's not what it looks like." I tilted my head. "It looks like you've been sleeping with Victor on your work trips and using me as a prop. It looks exactly like that." Her eyes went wet, fast. I'd seen it before, tears as a tactic, not a symptom. "I was confused," she said. "It was a phase. I've been under so much pressure. Victor just made you feel alive." I finished for her. "Yeah, I read that part." She opened her mouth, closed it, and tried a different route. "You're overreacting. Our marriage is more than a few emails. We can go to counseling, talk to someone, work through." "No," The word surprised even me with how flat it came out. She blinked. Mark, you can't just. I can, I said. And I am. I stood up, pushed the chair back in slowly. No shouting, no dishes flying. Just a man who'd finally stopped negotiating his own self-respect. You didn't make a mistake, I said. You made a choice, over and over. You humiliated me in my own house last night, in front of the man you've been cheating with. That wasn't an accident. That is who you really are when you think you're safe. She shook her head, tears spilling now. You're throwing everything away over. You threw it away, I said. I'm just taking out the trash. I slid the laptop back toward her. You have 24 hours to leave this house, I said. Tomorrow morning. I'm calling my lawyer and filing for divorce. Her breath hitched. You're serious? Completely. She tried one last angle. You can't just end 10 years like this. You ended it in hotel rooms and email threads. I nodded at the screen. This is just paperwork. She stared at me. Really stared. Like she was seeing someone she'd never met before. I could see it land. The realization that the helpful husband she rolled her eyes at had a line she'd finally crossed. I don't have anywhere to go, she whispered. Call Victor, I said. You two are good at finding hotels. For a second, rage flashed across her face. The real her. No performance. Then it vanished under panic. She stormed out of the kitchen, phone already in her hand. I heard the guest room door slam. Heard fragments of frantic calls, half-whispered arguments, the word lawyer a couple times. By 3 p.m, 2 suitcases were by the front door. She walked past me without meeting my eyes. Is this really what you want? She asked, hand on the handle. I didn't look up from the paperwork I was organizing. It's what I should have wanted the first time you made me the punchline, I said. She hesitated like she was waiting for me to crack, to soften, to ask her to stay. I didn't. The door opened, closed. The house went quiet again. For the first time in years, it was my quiet. 6 months before that dinner, I sat in a wood-paneled office that smelled like dust and expensive paper and listened to a stranger tell me my life had just changed. My grandmother, Eleanor Lawson, died at 89. To most people, she looked like any other old woman in a small Denver house. Cardigan sweaters, coupons in her purse, leftover coffee in the pot. What she actually was, a shark that moved slow enough nobody noticed. She'd bought small commercial buildings in rough neighborhoods back when nobody wanted them. Laundromats, garages, little strip malls with ugly signs. She'd taken funny internet stocks in the early days when everyone else called them stupid. Then she just held on. The estate lawyer walked me through it with a practiced calm. 6 commercial properties, fully paid off. A stock portfolio that made my head spin. Total value roughly $6.5 million. Realistically, he said, sliding a file toward me, you could retire tomorrow if you wanted to. I remember nodding like he'd told me the weather. Inside, I felt like someone had taken a crowbar to the floor under my feet. I didn't run home and tell Amanda. I didn't buy a new car or post anything or suddenly start talking about portfolio strategy at dinner. I opened a trust in my name only. I hired a financial planner, a tax attorney, a wealth manager who spoke in numbers instead of buzzwords. I kept every asset separate, clean, and documented. And there was this small, stubborn voice in the back of my head that said, wait, see who she is when she thinks you're just the guy in the ambulance. By the time I was sitting across from my divorce lawyer, Daniel Ruiz, that voice felt less like paranoia and more like prophecy. He went through the emails, the timeline, the dates. Good news for you, he said. All of this started before probate wrapped, before the inheritance hit. That makes it a lot harder for anyone to argue it's marital, especially since you never commingled funds. So she doesn't touch it, I said. He shook his head. Not a cent. Mediation day, Amanda walked in like she was entering a negotiation, not an autopsy. She had that tight professional look. Folder under her arm, blazer on, chin up. I could see the calculation in her eyes. She thought she was about to finally see the cards I'd been hiding. She asked pointed questions about undisclosed assets. tried to push for forensic accounting, tossed around words she'd heard in boardrooms. Daniel shut it down one by one, calm as a surgeon. No hidden accounts, no sudden mystery deposits, no commingled windfall. In the end, the deal was simple. She got half our joint savings, her imported car, her personal stuff, and a clean break. No alimony, no claim on anything in my name alone. She signed the papers with a hand that shook more than she wanted anyone to see. Walking out, she still had no idea that the man she'd mocked for being small could have bought the building her office sat in. She didn't know because I never told her. Some people think revenge is about what you take away. Sometimes it's about what you never let them touch. 3 weeks after the divorce finalized, Amanda made it official in the only church she really believed in, social media. I didn't follow her, but people talked. A buddy from the department showed me her page on his phone during a slow shift. There they were, Amanda and Victor in Aspen. Victor in a black turtleneck holding a glass of wine. Amanda pressed into his side like she'd finally traded up. Captions about finding someone who matches your drive. Hashtags about power couples and building empires together. I looked at the screen, nodded once, and handed the phone back. Good for them, I said, and I meant it in the coldest way possible. Life went on. I worked my shifts, met with my lawyer, my financial people, started sketching ideas for the foundation I hadn't named yet. By the time winter hit Denver hard, Amanda and Victor's little highlight reel had blended into the background noise. Then Daniel called me one afternoon. "You see the news?" he asked. "No. Check the business section when you get a minute. Your ex-wife's boss had a bad day." Later, on my lunch break, I sat in the ambulance bay and pulled up the article. Internal audit at their firm. $500,000 diverted into consulting expenses that turned out to be Victor's personal crypto fund and a couple of doomed startup investments with his friends. No authorization, no disclosure. The kind of thing you think you'll get away with until someone hungrier than you wants your chair. He'd been fired. There was talk of charges. Words like fraud, breach of fiduciary duty, and malpractice were all over the page. Amanda's name wasn't in the headline, but it showed up 3 paragraphs down. Senior account director who oversaw several of the campaigns under investigation. I could see the next few months without needing details. Meetings in glass rooms where nobody makes eye contact. HR phrases like reputational risk. Lawyers combed through every document she'd signed with Victor. Whispers in hallways that stopped when she walked by. A couple weeks later, another small article. Senior staff transitioning out. Firm restructuring. Non-disclosure agreements, standard in these situations. Translation. She got cut loose with a check and a gag order. In a city like Denver, reputation moves faster than resumes. High-end firms talk. Recruiters compare notes. You don't want the woman whose name shows up in the same sentence as a fraud investigation, even if she walks away technically clean. I heard through a mutual friend that she was sending out applications and getting polite no's. That she'd gone from rising star to maybe in a year, when things cool down. Then came the last predictable part. One night my phone lit up with an unknown number. I let it go to voicemail. Later I listened. Victor's voice. Casual. "Hey Amanda, it was fun while it lasted, but I need to focus on my defense and keeping my own life in one piece. You're strong. You'll land on your feet." Wrong number. He'd meant it for her and fat-fingered mine instead. Old habit from when they used me as background noise in their messages. I deleted it, then blocked the number. They'd built an empire on ego, shortcuts, and other people's backs. The empire did what those always do. Collapsed on top of them. I didn't toast it. Didn't celebrate. I just went back to work. Their downfall wasn't my victory. My life was happening somewhere else. 15 years in an ambulance teaches you how fast things can end. After the divorce dust settled, after the lawyers stopped emailing and Amanda's name was just a line in a file, I realized I'd been living in reaction mode for too long. Calls, crises, other people's disasters. Even my own marriage had become something I responded to instead of led. So I retired. The guys at the station threw a small party. Sheet cake, bad coffee, a card full of jokes and respect. I turned in my badge and radio, stood in the bay one last time, and let the quiet sink in. No tones, no dispatcher, just a big empty space and the question, now what? The answer turned out to be 9,600 feet above sea level. I bought a place near Breckenridge. Not a mansion, not some glass-walled monument to myself. Just a solid mountain house with pine trees out front, snow on the roof half the year, and windows that filled themselves with sky and peaks whether I deserved the view or not. For a while I just exhaled, woke up without an alarm, cooked simple food, sat on the deck with coffee and watched the clouds drag shadows across the slopes. It was nice. It wasn't enough. Helping people was wired into me too deep to just turn off. I didn't miss the 12-hour shifts, but I missed the purpose. That's where the idea came from. Take the money my grandmother left me and do something that actually mattered, not just to me, but to people who'd never see inside a boardroom. The First Response Foundation started as a folder on my laptop and a few calls to my lawyer and accountant. Within 6 months, it was a registered nonprofit with a clear mission. Train and equip EMTs in the parts of Colorado everybody forgets until a wildfire or blizzard hits. I put in $1 million to start, bought equipment, paid instructors, covered tuition for kids from small towns who'd never thought about medicine as anything but a bill. The first class showed up in a rented training center. Nervous, loud, rough around the edges. Farm kids, grocery store clerks, a mechanic who'd watched his buddy die waiting for an ambulance that took 40 minutes to find the ranch. Standing in front of them, going over basic airway management, I heard someone call me Mr. Lawson. Felt strange. Then right. A local paper did a story. Photo of me in front of the mountain house. Trainees in bright vests behind me. The article talked about family inheritance, giving back. Retired EMT builds a legacy. They mentioned I was divorced in one sentence, near the bottom. No drama, no names, just a fact. That's when I knew I'd turned a corner. My life wasn't about what Amanda had done to me anymore. It was about what I chose to do next. I found out she'd seen the article on a Tuesday. I was in the mountain kitchen, making coffee, when my phone buzzed with a number I hadn't saved but knew by heart. Muscle memory. You don't forget the pattern of your ex-wife's phone number. You just bury it. I let it ring out. A text came through a minute later. We need to talk. Please call me. I put the phone face down on the counter and finished pouring my coffee. Later that day, an email hit my inbox. Long paragraphs stacked on top of each other. She'd seen the story. She was happy for me. She'd made terrible mistakes. She deserved to understand why I'd kept the inheritance from her. There were apologies built like legal statements, carefully worded, emotionally shaped, all leading toward the same quiet thesis. You owe me an explanation. Maybe more. I closed it without replying. That night, the voicemail came. Her voice was smaller than I remembered. No conference room polish, no edge. Mark, it's me. I saw the article. I didn't know about your grandmother or the money or any of it. I'm so sorry for how I treated you. I was stupid. I was selfish. I know I don't have the right to ask you for anything, but can you please call me back? I need to talk to you. I listened to the whole thing at the kitchen table. Snow was tapping the windows. The foundation's paperwork was spread out in front of me. Different life, different man. It hit me then. She didn't suddenly remember who I was. She'd finally realized who I'd become without her. The math had changed. That's all. She'd traded me in when she thought she was upgrading. Now the small EMT in the background had a mountain house, a foundation, and a future built on something real. Meanwhile, her empire had turned to smoke. I deleted the voicemail, not out of spite, not to get revenge. I deleted it because I finally understood something simple. People who humiliate you in public, then dismantle you in private, don't get to come back when the scoreboard flips. Silence was my boundary, so I kept it. When closure isn't a conversation, but a choice. 2 years after the divorce, I walked into a charity gala in Denver wearing a black tux that actually fit and a calm I didn't have the last time I'd stood in a room like that. I wasn't there as someone's plus one. I was on the program short speech about rural EMS training, a video about the foundation, and a polite round of applause already printed into the schedule. Megan was at my side. We'd met teaching first aid in a town most people only see on accident. She's 34, a nurse with tired eyes and steady hands. The kind of woman who shows up to a house that smells like despair and starts washing dishes without making a big deal out of it. She's got a 7-year-old daughter named Lily who eats pancakes in my kitchen on Sundays and leaves crayon drawings on my fridge. Megan knew about the inheritance, knew about the divorce, didn't care about the first, cared a lot about the second. "If you ever let someone talk to you like that again," she'd said once, "I'll be mad at you, not them." The ballroom was the usual scene. Waiters, chandeliers, people pretending they weren't watching each other. I was talking to a hospital administrator about expanding our training when I felt it. That prickle at the back of your neck that says someone's looking at you. I glanced across the room. Amanda stood near a display banner, name tag clipped to a simple dress, representing some small PR firm that didn't have the gloss her old one did. She looked good but older. Not in her face, but in the way she held herself. Less certainty, more scanning. Our eyes met. Half a second. Maybe less. Long enough for everything to flash through my head. Candles on a table. Laughter at my expense. Emails on a screen. A mountain house. Trainees in bright vests. A little girl's laughter in my kitchen. Her expression shifted through 3 things fast. Surprise, calculation, regret. I gave her nothing. No smile. No nod. No glare. Just a neutral glance. The kind you'd give a stranger you're pretty sure you've seen somewhere before but don't feel like placing. Then I turned back to my group and finished my sentence about grant funding. Later that night, I stood at the podium and talked about response times, training costs, and the value of having someone show up when the worst 5 minutes of your life hit. People clapped. Some donated. Megan squeezed my hand under the table. Driving home through the city lights, I realized I didn't feel triumphant. I didn't feel wounded. I just felt done. What I'd learned was simple. Respect can't be negotiated into someone. If they don't have it, they don't have it. Public humiliation leaves a mark you don't fully scrub out, but you can grow around it. And a man born to serve still gets to choose who and what he serves. Not everyone who loses you deserves to find you again. Sometimes the strongest thing you'll ever do is what I did at that gala. See the past standing 10 yards away and decide it gets nothing from you. Not a word, not a look, just absence.